Wearing my philosophy t-shirt for this one. So, what's philosophy? What's philosophy? What's philosophy? I'm going to try and make this video a short one. I know it's not going to be because it's such a big topic, but I've tried to just keep it to its core components, the things that you will expect from, I guess, any philosophy course that you might do. So let's do that. Start off with a definition of what philosophy is, according to the internet, and then let's break it down into its core principles. So the first definition is that philosophy is a study of fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. And then the second definition is that philosophy is the theory that acts as a guiding principle for behavior. So we're going to go through each one of those as a topic in philosophy. We'll start with that last definition of philosophy. It's a theory that acts as a guiding principle for behavior. That is the branch of philosophy known as ethics, and it bleeds into literally every other subject. When you do a science, whether it's a social science or a hard science, you will have to do ethics, and when you do studies, you have to have an ethical committee agree to your study. So modern technology, when we're looking at self-driving cars and artificial intelligence, those are all underpinned by ethics. What is ethics? Ethics is the study of right and wrong. It's the guide that helps us decide how we ought to live, either individually or as a society. There are three things that we look at when it comes to deciding whether an action is right or wrong. That is the intentions of the action itself, and the consequences of that action. Each of those have kind of a school of thought that goes along with thinking that that one is more superior. Like in ancient Greeks, you had virtue ethics. That is one of the principles. That is how you should act as a person. Immanuel Kant developed an idea of deontology. So that's the actions themselves. These are things that you just shouldn't do or that should do that make them moral, by doing that thing or not. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, the ideas of consequentialism or utilitarianism, that's the focus on the consequences of the action being the most important thing, the net benefit being the most important part of an action. Does it do good in the world in the end? No matter if you had really bad intentions, did it do something good? Ethics is completely unavoidable. It's in law, it's in TV and cinema. So let's look at an example from there. Let's look at Thanos from the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thanos' idea was that he wanted to eradicate half the population so that the other half could have a better way of living. He took into account pain and suffering. When people die, it's normally a bad thing, especially the way he was going around crusading. So his idea was that he'd eradicate half the population in an instant, in a click of his fingers, so that there was no pain, no suffering to those that half of the universe. So his intention is a good one. He wants the population, the world, the universe to have a better standard of living. He doesn't want it to dive into chaos. He doesn't want people to struggle for resources and poverty. He wants there to be abundance for all the people in the world. That's a positive intention. That's a good thing. However, his action, his way of doing it is to eradicate half of the universe, although he took into account the pain and suffering, and he wants them to be eradicated painlessly. However, the consequences of that is one thing that he didn't foresee, because it didn't have the intended consequences that he wanted. Good intentions didn't happen. People tend to be consequentialists when it comes to Thanos because the consequences were negative, destroying half the population, and the consequences that ensued were negative. He's a good guy. He wants to minimize pain and suffering, maximize consequentialism, utilitarianism. That's what that is. Second subject I'm going to talk about is epistemology. So in the first definition I read out, it says philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge. And that's what epistemology is starting off by saying, what is knowledge? What does that mean? If I know something, what does it mean to know something? Okay, there's an idea that, you know, it's a flawed idea, but that knowledge is a justified, true belief. So, you know, you've got to believe it to have knowledge. It's got to be in here. It needs to be true, and you need to have a justification for believing that. But I'm not going to go into that. But there are definitions behind what knowledge is. One of the fundamentals of that is the truth part. So how can we know what is true? And this is a question that underpins the whole idea of modern science. Well, how can we know something is true? Which, you know, we've led to a type of empiricism, which is what science is fundamentally based on now. The idea of how we can gain a truth about the world. But what if the world's an illusion and we're just living in the matrix? Personally, I think epistemology is one of the most underrated subjects in the world because it underpins all modern areas that try and look at truth, trying to find truths about the world. Now, in psychology, specifically social psychology, there is a problem of replicability, so being able to replicate studies. Now, this problem is either a problem of two things. One is a problem of the mode of practicality, how people conduct themselves, and maybe there needs to be harsher rules for people in conducting research, or it's a problem, it's an epistemic problem, that there is a fundamental theoretical idea that we're missing out that from our empirical research that would help us better find something true about the world. The next one I'm going to talk about, the third one, is logic, mathematical logic. Now, when I started studying philosophy, I didn't really know what this was. I just used the word logic as most people do, but in essence, it is mathematical. And that's what it looks like. It's a way of using maths to determine if propositions and premises are true. So taking linguistic features, taking words and meanings, and turning them into something mathematical to determine their truth value. Okay, so it's all about truth value. Can we know something true from what this person is saying? Let's make it easy. Let's turn it into maths. It is obviously used in debate all the time. There are a bunch of premises and truth values and truth tables and a lot of theoretical stuff that you have to learn in philosophy, because then you can understand where theoretically some things trip up and your debates are problematic and your reasonings are problematic, just at their very core, if you don't understand some of the problems that you can find in logical reasoning. One that studies computing, okay, so computer coding, modern computer coding was developed off the back of the theoretical work that is done, was done for mathematical logic. It's the same when you learn about Boolean search, right, in your job. If this, then this, that's a mathematical principle. If A, then B. If B and C, then D, you know, these shorthand type of proofs, they come from mathematical logic. The last one I'm going to talk about is my least favorite. This is the study of metaphysics. It is a core of anything that you might do in philosophy. Personally, it's one of my least favorite, so bear with me. I mean, one of the things that you might study in metaphysics is the idea of causes and effects. So when things come before one thing, A, then B, and what kind of implications that has on the real world. You know, that links with space and time as well. The concepts, what is space, what is time. Personally, I think science is doing a lot better job at kind of figuring these things out using, you know, computational studies, experiments, what have you. But one of the famous things that came out of philosophy talking about space and time is the idea of the grandfather paradox, right? So this is the idea of time travel. Can we time travel? That's something I've written about in the past. And the grandfather paradox is this: if you go back in time on a linear timeline, if time was just one straight line, and you're here and you go back in time before your granddad and you kill your granddad, then you will no longer exist. And if you don't exist, then you wouldn't have been able to go back in the first place to kill your granddad. etc., etc., etc. Linked with that, in metaphysics, you might study about modalities or possible worlds. There's a lot of literature on this, and it is littered in sci-fi about alternate universes and possible worlds. One of the things you might study as well in metaphysics is the idea of modalities and possible worlds. Again, things that are littered in sci-fi, kind of inescapable. What else? Mental and physical. So how much one impacts the other and what the causes and effects of that. Again, a lot of stuff linking in. It's highly logical aspect of philosophy. And the categorization of things as well is the last thing I'll mention. So what makes something what it is? What defining features does one have to be to, you know, become the thing that it is? As an example, so the famous idea, again, this was used in Marvel with Vision, is the idea of Theseus's ship. So this is the idea that if Theseus has a ship and one of the planks develops a hole in it, starts rotting, and then they take out one piece of wood and exchange it for a different piece, etc., etc., till eventually all the wooden pieces of the ship have been taken off one by one and exchanged for other pieces. Is that ship still Theseus's ship, or is it a different ship because it has none of the original parts? And if we were to collect the pieces that we're taking off the ship one by one and piece them together to build a second ship, is that ship Theseus's ship, or is that just some chunk of rotting wood? So there you go, there's some basics of philosophy. I've thrown out some keywords so that if you're interested, you can go and research that stuff for yourself, and you can go and research the broad topics yourself also. So thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you probably didn't. I don't think I did. See you on my next video. I post every week, so look out for the short videos as well as the more long form content. Takes me a while, but you know, I get there.